Yankee Doodle's Cousins by Anne, that's actually compiled by Anne Malcolmson. And what it is, it's a young adult book. It's directed to young adult audience. A collection of traditional American folk tales from all parts of the country that she put together to kind of encourage pride of nation, patriotism, and so on the eve of World War II. So this story comes from that. It's a story actually from New Amsterdam. So it's a very early story, and there are a couple stories in here that I've used here in various contexts. One of my other favorites is a story about a Captain Paddock, a whaling captain, and it's kind of a story about witches. So I tell that one at Halloween. Yeah. So, but this one is very much appropriate for Saint Nicolas Day. And of course, what do you call Saint Nicolas now? Santa what?
Claus.
Santa Claus. Yeah. Claus or Klaus is a short form of Nicholas. It's the old Dutch short form. And this is Santa Claus, just means saint. Mm-hmm. So, well, it's we're talking about Saint Nicholas. The Dutch still celebrate Saint Nicholas Day. It's December 6th. And now, we think of Santa Claus coming on with a sleigh, with the magical reindeer and so on. Well, in early Dutch tradition, Saint Nicholas comes on a horse, but now he comes by boat. He comes into Rotterdam Harbor by boat from Seville in Spain with treats. Yeah, oranges do not grow around here. Oranges do not grow around Holland. They come from Seville, so it's still very much a big celebration in Holland and from the Dutch colonies and so on. Anyway, here we go. 300 years ago, in the little city of New Amsterdam, there lived a young cobbler named Klaus, which is short for Nicholas. A fortunate young fellow indeed was Klaus. He had a lovely brick house with a garden, a big pond full of fat white geese, a thriving trade, and a pretty wife whose name was Anita. He had worked hard for these blessings from the first bleak day when he landed on the shores of the New World, an orphan boy from Holland. He now was a rich man, rich enough to wear 8 pairs of breeches at once. And the only dark cloud in his sky was Rolfson, the Burgomeister, an old meister who had long been in love with Anita. As the richest old bachelor in town, he had expected her to marry him without any question. When she married the poor cobbler boy, the burgomaster's pride was hurt. He swore that he would have his revenge. Whenever Klaus and Anita walked out in their Sunday clothes, with their family of fat Dutch children toddling behind them, he hid behind the heavy curtains of his house and said terrible things. At last, his ugly thoughts were put into deeds. He taught the village blacksmith to make hobnails for the townspeople's boots. These nails made a dreadful racket as they clattered over the brick streets, but they kept the boots from wearing out. The boots wore so long that poor Klaus had very little business as a cobbler. He had a very hard time of it to make ends meet. This was not enough for the black-hearted Burgomeister, however. Klaus and his Anita still lived in their fine brick house and walked out on Sundays with their handsome clothes. Rolfson had to think of something else. Soon he knew what to do. As an officer of the city, he ordered a new street to be built. This street ran right through the middle of Class's pond. The city builders came and drained the pond. Poor Class had to sell his beloved geese. This was a great blow to him because the eggs he sold at the marketplace helped make up for the boots he was unable to sell. But this was not the worst of it. As Class sat by his fire, sorry for the loss of his geese, he had visitors. These were men from the city council. Since the road ran through his land, they said, he should pay for building it. They demanded 50 pieces of gold for this purpose. 50 pieces of gold? That was all Class had tucked away in his teapot. Class and Aniti had to work harder than ever to keep their family fed and clothed. They sold vegetables from their little garden and managed to make themselves a fair living. Then came the jealous burgomaster. He built another road through the middle of Class's garden patch. This time, once again, the poor cobbler had to rob his teapot of the vegetable money in order to pay for this road. And so it went. Every time Class made a little money, Burgomaster made a new road and made him pay for it. Before long, he had to sell his fine house. No longer could he afford to wear 8 pairs of breeches, nor need he her 12 petticoats. The little family was poor. They had sold all their belongings except a bare few. They lived in a miserable little cottage with only a dirt floor. The wicked old burgomaster was at last satisfied. He danced with joy when he saw how the cobbler had fallen. This would show the people of New Amsterdam that no orphan boy could outdo the wealthy Herr Wolfson. On Christmas Eve, as the burgomaster was enjoying his fine dinner, Class and Aniti and their children sat huddled before the fireplace in their little cottage. The very last log burned on the hearth and gave out little heat at best. Their cupboard, like old Mother Hubbard's, was bare. After this supper of bread and cheese, not a crumb remained. A poor Christmas this would be. No presents, no blazing fire, not even a dinner. Of all their possessions, only 2 treasures remained. One was the Bible which Class's mother had given him long ago. It was bound in beautiful leather and held shut with silver clasps. Class was tempted to take off these clasps and sell them. They might bring him enough money to provide a Christmas for his children. No, said Aniti, to sell the clasps from a Bible? That would be wicked. We should never think of doing such a thing. Better it would be to starve than to feast on the sale of holy things. The other treasure which remained was a pipe. This was a special, lovely, pure meerschaum pipe, which to Class had a magic meaning. As a little boy, leaving his home for the new world, he found the pipe in his stocking. Where it had come from, he could not tell. He was sure it was a present from the good Saint Nicolas himself. The thought of selling this treasure nearly broke his heart. Even so, it was better than the thought of selling his mother's silver clasps. He reached down into the family chest and took out his beloved meerschaum. Sadly, he rubbed it against his trousers and watched it gleam in the firelight. As he rubbed it, the cottage door swung open and a blast of cold air filled the room. There before the fire stood a fat little stranger, about 3 feet tall. He was dripping with snow, and icicles were hanging from his shaggy eyebrows and his long white beard. "Brrr," muttered the stranger crossly. "It's a wonder you wouldn't answer the door when a traveler knocks. Fine manners, I must say, on a night like this." All thoughts of the pipe were forgotten as Class and Anita stared at their visitor. The children scrambled to hide under the bed. Only their bright blue eyes showed out from behind the curtains. "Well, come on, went the visitor, growing more angry every minute. Don't stand there. The least you can do is put another log on the fire so I can warm myself. Can't you see I am half frozen? I'm very sorry, sir, admitted Class, finding his tongue at last. But there is no log to put on the fire. You're very welcome to warm yourself at our poor hearth. Well then, snapped the stranger, send one of those ragamuffins out to the woodshed. I'm freezing, I tell you. He glared at the children, who pushed themselves farther under the bed hangings. Oh, sir, cried Needy, if only we had some more wood in the woodshed, we would gladly fetch it for you. But alas, this is our last stick. We have no more to keep ourselves warm. Huh, snorted the little fellow. That's very careless of you. But what must be, must be. With that, he cracked his fine cane he carried over his knee. It broke into several pieces. These he tossed into the coals. As they struck the fire, something wonderful happened. Each of the pieces of cane changed into a big birch log. The dark coals blazed up, and soon the room was dancing with the light of a huge fire. That's better, muttered the stranger. Upon my life, I thought I should turn to an icicle for all you cared. The children crept out from their hiding place to gape at the magic blaze. Class and Aniti rubbed their eyes. And now I suppose you're going to let me starve to death too, sneered the visitor, looking in the direction of the cupboard. It's a wonder you wouldn't invite me to have some supper. I haven't eaten since this morning. Tears came to Aniti's eyes. Oh, sir, whoever you may be, we should be indeed happy to give you our last crumb. But she sobbed, we have nothing to eat in the house. We ate our last scrap of cheese for our evening meal. Well, that was certainly rude of you, barked the funny little man. Here I come after a hard day's tramp over the mountains, through wind and rain and snow. You say you have no fire to warm me. You say you have no bread to feed me. My dear lady, I know better. Your shelves are heaped with cakes and apples, and if that's not roast goose I smell cooking, I'll eat my beard. Without thinking, the whole family stared stiff. Why, they did smell roast goose, and cabbage, and onion, and mince pie and pumpkin. These delicious smells were fairly bursting from the oven door. They looked quickly at the cupboard. Its shelves were groaning under the bowls of apples and pears and platters of cakes and cookies. The water jug was filled to the brim with sweet cider. Don't stand there like a forest of trees, shouted the stranger. Can't you see I am dying of hunger? Get me something to eat and be quick about it. No food indeed. Well, there's a whole feast in there. Put it on the table. Not knowing whether to be overjoyed or frightened, Class and Aniti set the table and drew it before the fire. They opened the wide door of the oven. There indeed were the goose and the vegetables and the pies they smelled. At the sight of the richly spread table, the children forgot their shyness. Hungrily they feasted, but none of them ate so much as did their visitor. Time and again he passed back his plate for another drumstick. An ordinary goose has 2 drumsticks, but this one sprouted a new one whenever the little man passed his plate. When at last the fat little stranger had enough, and the buttons began to burst from Class's coat, the table was cleared away. No longer did the visitor snap angrily at his host. He leaned back in his chair and lit his pipe. A twinkle appeared in his eye, and he patted the children's blond heads. For an hour he sat talking pleasantly with the happy family, telling strange and marvelous stories of distant lands. Not once did he tell them who he was. At the stroke of midnight, he got up from his chair. I must be off, he exclaimed. Thank you indeed for a pleasant evening and a delicious dinner. He turned to Class. Don't ever sell that pipe. With that, a gust of wind down the chimney filled the whole room with smoke. Before the family could open their staring, smarting eyes again, the stranger was gone without so much as a goodbye. In the morning, class was awakened by a great hammering at his door. There was the burgomaster and Olson and a party of soldiers. "We have come to arrest you," they screamed. "You are a wizard, a witch, a magician. You are a disgrace to the city of New Amsterdam." Poor class didn't know what to make of it. Why would anybody call him a wizard? He was nothing but a poor cobbler who had a lovely dream. "Come," roared the burgomaster. "Open the door and let us in. We'll have no wizards in our city." As he slowly awakened, class looked around him. The wretched cottage had disappeared. He was standing in the hall of a great house. The walls were hung with silks, and from the cupboards shone silver platters and copper bowls. He looked timidly out the window. Around him spread wide lawns and gardens, and in the distance glimmered an ice of a huge pond. "Open up, I say," bellowed the burgomaster. "Open up in the name of the law. We have come to take you to jail as you deserve." The class opened the door. In poured the soldiers. "Aha!" screamed Herr Olson, his face red with anger. "Seize him! Seize the witch! He has not only changed his cottage into a fine estate, he has filled his chests with gold." Before the astonished class, the burgomaster lifted the lid of a chest. The great box was full to the top with pieces of money. "You thief! You robber! But before he could finish the sentence, a pair of invisible hands clapped themselves over his mouth. More hands, which could not be seen, grabbed the soldiers. Then came an awful whacking and thrashing, the unseen arms paddling the burgomaster and the party with his unseen switches. "Ouch! Help! Stop it!" yelled Olson. But the paddling went on. The soldiers ran down the path to the main road and headed away from town, crying and yelling and trying to defend themselves from the blows of the unseen paddlers. That was the last ever seen of the jealous burgomaster. Klaus and his family lived on in their fine new home, never wanting for food or warmth. How their good fortune had come, they did not know. The only clue they had was a piece of paper slipped under the door. It said simply, "Don't ever sell that pipe." So, village videographer, Chris.
Thank you.
He has a very nice website. I encourage you to take a look for it. It's on YouTube.
Good.
And he has this will eventually show up there, I'm sure. And he has videos of many of our programs that we have here at the village. Candlelight Evenings, Independence Day, he did a very nice Independence Day program this past July. So they're all there. And they get it.